The city charter is like the Constitution for the city of Sandusky, like the Constitution of the United States. In a Ohio home rule state, cities are allowed to have their own charters, and the charters can differ from state law. But the charter is meant to be a guiding document. Most of the rules come from the city commission, which passes ordinances. Those are the laws of the city. But those laws cannot be in contravention to the city charter. The city charter is above all of that. Okay. Yeah, the city of Sandusky, under its charter, only reviews the charter once every 5 years as part of the charter review process. Charters, like constitutions, are meant to be very difficult to change. So once every 5 years, the city constitutes a charter review committee, 14 members of the community who do not serve on the city commission or work for the city. They are appointed and they review, and this year they reviewed every single section of our current charter. And after deliberations, they recommended 5 charter changes to the city commission. And then after their deliberations, because to get it on the ballot, the city commission must have at least 5 votes to get a recommended change onto the ballot. They moved 3 of those 5 to the ballot this November. Okay. Issue 3 is recommended initially by our chief of police. This is a very competitive environment currently for hiring policemen. Following the Ohio Civil Service rules requires an involved process of establishing a list, giving a test, having the list last for 2 years, and then hiring people off of that list. If new candidates come up in those 2 years, we cannot hire them. The current civil service rules forbid us from doing that. Other communities have used their home rule powers to create better ways of civil service hiring competitive jobs, especially jobs like police and fire. We can have rolling lists if we so choose. All issue 3 does is empower the city to have all the powers of local self-government, and then it would be up to the Civil Service Commission, which we already have, to establish rules that they think would make us most competitive in hiring the right employees for the city. And then once they propose those rules, the city commission would then have to approve them. And then once the city commission approves them, if this section passes, then we can then operate under new rules. Our ethics provision of the charter, section 43 of the charter, is 1 paragraph long. And it seems to be very similar to the ethics that are in the state of Ohio, ethics law. Last I looked, I tried to print out the Ohio ethics law, and it's about 25 pages of statutes. It's comprehensive. There's a lot of case law that interprets it. The Ohio Ethics Commission has a staff of full-time lawyers who both prosecute what they believe to be ethics violations and who are there to give advice to public officials as to what is or is not that might violate Ohio ethics law. Our 1 paragraph is not nearly as comprehensive. We have no case law interpreting it. And there's a good argument that it may not even be effective in the sense that the Ohio ethics law is a criminal statute. And under the Home Rule Amendment, we are not allowed to make anything criminal that Ohio law makes non-criminal, or vice versa, or make anything non-criminal that Ohio law makes criminal. So to the extent it does conflict with Ohio ethics law, it may not be enforceable at all. Okay. So the simplest thing we think is to indicate that our charter, that we will strictly follow Ohio ethics law, and when Ohio ethics law, if it changes because someone discovers a loophole or whatever, then our charter will automatically go along track with the Ohio ethics law. What the text of issue 5 does is put the maximum amount for both bidding and for commission approval in the hands of the city commission. As inflation, the $10,000 limit in our current charter was set decades ago. when I imagine $10,000 bought you a lot. In fact, at one of my other podcasts here, I took an example from my own life. Back when I went to law school at Case Western Reserve, it cost $5,000 a year for tuition. Back then, you could buy a brand new Cadillac for $5,000. Now, the tuition at Case is $60,000, I think, or $70,000, and a Cadillac is about the same price. So what we could buy when this charter provision was first passed is nowhere near what we can buy now. In fact, just today, I reviewed 2 contracts from the last commission meeting, this last Monday. This one was for $49,000, and it had to be bid. You had to go through the bid process. This is double-sided, by the way. You had to, there had to be a bond. The bidder had to put up a bond in order to bid. They had to attend the pre-bid meeting. They had to go through all of the specifications. And then finally, they had to put up a performance bond. And for a contract of $11,500, that doesn't make any sense at all. That's just requiring the city of Sandusky to pay a lot more money for contracts when it shouldn't have to. This, the other one I reviewed today, and you can see it's just about the exact same size in terms of the documentation required, and that's all been prepared by people here in the city of Sandusky's administration. This was for $2 million. Now, obviously, we always want to bid a $2 million contract because the cost of doing so is not that large in comparison to the project itself. But like even for a $49,000 contract, we have substantially raised the price of this contract by having the contractor jump through all these hoops. And don't forget, what the amount of commission approval can be different than the amount required for bidding. In fact, I'm not on the commission, but if I were, I would consider raising the amount of required for bidding substantially. That's where the cost savings will be. But I could still keep, because this amendment would allow the commission to do that, all approvals must still be $10,000. But if they don't have to go through the extensive paperwork in order to get a contract up for bid, that would save the city a lot of money, yet still retain control in the city commission to approve all expenditures over whatever amount they deem appropriate. And don't forget, everything that comes before the commission for approval has already been approved as part of the budgeting process. When the city goes through the budgeting process at the beginning of the year, each department is asked and given and has to spell out how they're going to spend their money in the coming year. And for example, the police chief has used examples of his police cars. He might decide that based on the age of the cars that we have, that we're going to need 2 police cars in the coming year to replace the ones that we have. The commission will meet on that, an estimated cost will be given, and they will approve it or not approve it. But if they approve it, it's now in the budget. The trouble with our current charter provisions is he can't just go out and buy the cars. Now he either has to go through a bidding process here at the city of Sandusky with all that paperwork that I just showed you, or we can attach ourselves to one of the state bids. That's where the state of Ohio says to the car manufacturers, we want to set a price for all the municipalities in the state of Ohio. What is your best price? And Ford and General Motors, they all give us a price, and we'll give the state a price. And then but they also allocate a certain number of cars to that bid price. Our process requires at least a 3 or 4 week delay before we're allowed, once that price is set by the state, before our chief can then ask the commission to purchase one of those cars. And our experience, at least in the last 2 years, has been the allocation is already gone by the time we get around to telling them that we're ready. Again, the budgeting process, everybody has to go through that, whether you're a township or a city. We do that, and if the public's paying attention to how we're budgeting our money, they'll know how we're planning to spend it. Again, the commission, if this passes, can set a different amount for approval than for public bidding. Public bidding, if it's not on one of those pre-bid contracts like the state has for police cars, as I described, you got to go through this process. Anything over $10,000, you have to add the cost of preparing all of this, not just for us, but for the vendor. The vendor is going to put the cost of their performance bond, their bid bond, attending the pre-bid meeting, all of those things that they have to do extra for a bid process. They will roll that into their price. And so we wind up paying a lot more for things. If people want, and if the city commission wants to approve every expenditure, they can. In fact, there's nothing in this charter that would prevent them from lowering the amount for approval, which they could not do now. If we get elected city commissioners that say 10,000 is too much for us to approve, they can lower it to whatever they want, or they can raise it. Hopefully what they do for approval doesn't impact nearly as much as what they do for what is required for bidding. And the charter amendment also requires, just because we don't do bidding doesn't mean we're not getting competitive quotes. The proposed charter amendment does set the threshold for $5,000, and that'd be a hard number, it can't be changed by the commission, that if you're going to buy something that costs more than $5,000, you have to get competitive quotes. But competitive quotes is very different than having to go through a formal bid process where you have to advertise in the local papers, again, go through the whole bidding rigmarole, give 30 days notice, open bids at a date certain, and then require performance bonds and bidding bonds and all the other things that we require in a formal bidding process. Competitive quotes can be as simple as writing a letter or getting a letter from 3 different vendors or 2 different vendors or whatever, however many vendors we can find. What would you charge for X? And we then would pick the lowest and best price. Yeah, the state audit requires us, there are 2 different kinds of state audits, and all cities go through both kinds. There's the audit where the state auditor's office itself looks at all of our expenditures, determined if our expenditures were appropriate, were authorized, and pursuant to law. And then there's the audit where the state auditor, because there are too many municipalities, townships, for the state auditor to do them all. They can't. But what the law requires is that then we are required to hire an auditor. It's an independent auditor. Just because we hire them doesn't mean they'll do what we say. In fact, they are given direction by the state of Ohio how to do an audit. And so the hired auditor would come in and do the same thing that the state auditor would do. We looked around the state of Ohio and we couldn't find any charter that had a limitation such as Sandusky, certainly not as low as Sandusky. I am familiar with at least one community that does this by ordinance, which is what I think it ought to be done by. And there the city, in their case council, set the number at $15,000 a number of years ago, at least 5 years ago when I started to work there. Before I left, they changed that to $25,000 as a result of, again, some of the same things we're talking about here, the ability of the city to purchase items without having to go through the complicated and expensive formal bidding process, as opposed to just getting competitive quotes. What this allows us to do is to react in a more business-like way, and it doesn't mean that we're not accountable. All our purchases are put in the budget first, pre-approved by the commission as to what each department is going to spend and how it's going to spend it. And then once that's done, it shouldn't come as a surprise when, for example, the chief of police wants to buy 2 police cars. That's already been pre-approved and the public has had an opportunity to weigh in on whether or not that's a good idea. Certainly it does not authorize the city manager or anyone else to just willy-nilly spend $77,250, which is the current state limit, but but under this charter amendment, the city will be allowed to set a lower limit by the city commission at any amount it wants that's lower than that number. Now, some cities actually set a number that's higher than that under their home rule powers, but our charter amendment does limit our city commission to the amount that's allowed under state law. And the amount that's under state law is there for any little township. It's allowed for any city that doesn't have a limitation in their charter. It's there for them to allow them to buy things in a more business-like way, getting competitive quotes for purchases, and then having them approved by whether trustees or city council or whoever is involved. Well, you can find more information from our website, cityofsandusky.com/charter, which explains all of these charter issues. Voting, of course, is November 4th, but there's early voting going on now. And check with the Erie County Board of Elections for all the dates and times for early voting, because they change from week to week.